There's uncertainty among Wisconsin farmers as China raises tariffs on U.S. imports to 125%.
The top U.S. farm export to China is soybeans.
There's uncertainty among Wisconsin farmers as China raises tariffs on U.S. imports to 125%. The top U.S. farm export to China is soybeans. My dad used to farm it, says Doug Fuller, whose family has been farming in northern Polk County for generations. Now I get to call all the shots. He's already nervous about the cash crop is about to start planting. Soybeans are the target of China's retaliatory 10% tariff on imports from the United States in response to President Trump's 10% blanket tariff on Chinese goods. Fuller is fearful it spells bad news for the 2025 harvest. You know, they aren't good for the other countries. They aren't good for me. And who could blame them for putting reciprocal tariffs on us? You know, it's just a match, and nobody's going to win. In the pre-dawn haze of April 2025, a hulking cargo ship burdened with 300,000 tons of soybeans glides silently into China's Tianjin port after a grueling 10-day voyage from Argentina. The crew breathes easy, confident in their impeccable paperwork, each sack boldly labeled Made in Argentina. But as the sun rises, Chinese customs officials swarm the docks, their faces taut with suspicion. In a move that sends shockwaves across the globe, they reject the entire shipment, declaring, "These soybeans aren't Argentine at all. They are American, cloaked in a daring disguise." The world is left reeling. Why would U.S. soybeans be smuggled through Argentina? How did China uncover this audacious fraud? And who bears the cost of this high-stakes game of trade deception? Step into a riveting tale of tariffs, trickery, and a humble legume at the epicenter of a global economic showdown. This wasn't just a routine customs check gone awry. It was a bombshell that exposed the desperate lengths to which nations and traders will go in the escalating U.S.-China trade war. As tariffs soar and trust crumbles, the soybean has emerged as an unlikely symbol of economic warfare, ensnaring farmers, exporters, and consumers in a web of geopolitical intrigue. The roots of this soybean scandal date back to early 2025, when U.S. President Donald Trump, having been re-elected, declared China the United States' greatest economic adversary. In February, he slapped a 10% tariff on all Chinese imports, a figure that ballooned to an astonishing 145% by April 10th, effectively paralyzing bilateral trade. China didn't hesitate to retaliate. On February 10th, Beijing imposed 15% tariffs on U.S. coal and liquefied natural gas, as well as 10% tariffs on crude oil, agricultural machinery, large displacement cars, and pickup trucks. Export controls were tightened on critical metals like tungsten, molybdenum, bismuth, and indium. By March 3rd, China escalated further, levying 15% tariffs on U.S. chicken, wheat, corn, and cotton, and 10% tariffs on sorghum, pork, beef, aquatic products, fruits, vegetables, and dairy. The most seismic move was China's decision to halt all purchases of U.S. soybeans. This was a cornfield last year, Fuller remarks. He's used to watching the corn and soybean grow in the field closely, but lately his eyes have been on something else. "We don't want to be stuck in the middle of this," he says, as China announces a 125% tariff on U.S. imports. Fuller, who is also the president of the Wisconsin Soybean Association, says there's unease. For a nation of 1.4 billion people, soybeans are a cornerstone of the food supply, fueling everything from soy milk to livestock feed. While China is largely self-sufficient in rice, wheat, and corn, its domestic soybean production, 20.62 million tons in 2024, falls far short of its needs. In 2024, China imported 157 million tons of grain, costing $50.8 billion, with soybeans accounting for 105 million tons, 66% of the total. For every $100 spent on grain imports, over $70 went to soybeans. Historically, Brazil and the U.S. supplied over 80% of China's soybeans, with Brazil exporting 74 million tons, $26.94 billion, and the U.S. 22 million tons, $9 billion, in 2024. Argentina, with its competitive pricing and robust output, also became a key supplier, exporting 4.1018 million tons at $374 per ton. The reliance on imports stemmed from China's massive and growing demand for soybeans, driven by its expanding population and changing dietary habits. In 2022, China purchased nearly 3 million tons of soybeans from Argentina in a single month, almost matching its total of 3.75 million tons in 2021. By January-February 2025, China had already imported 120,000 tons from Argentina, with projections suggesting 2025 could surpass the previous year's totals. Argentine soybean growers were optimistic, eyeing China's vast market as a golden opportunity. But the events of April 2025 would shatter those hopes and expose a deeper conspiracy. By mid-2025, U.S. tariffs on Chinese goods had soared to 245%, choking American soybean exports to China, the world's largest buyer. U.S. soybean production, already down from 119 million tons in 2016 to 100 million tons in 2024, face a dire crisis. Farmers in states like Iowa, Illinois, and Minnesota, where soybeans are grown across over 30 million hectares, watch their crops pile up unsold. The U.S. had once enjoyed a golden era of soybean exports, peaking in 2016 at 58.23 million tons, with China importing 36.1 million tons, 62% of the U.S. total and 30% of its production. However, by 2024, exports to China had plummeted to 22.12 million tons, a decline of nearly 14 million tons, mirroring a 19 million ton drop in U.S. production. Desperate to access China's market, some U.S. exporters turned to deception. Their plan: ship soybeans to South American countries like Argentina, repackage them with forged certificates of origin, and pass them off as Argentine to bypass China's tariffs and import ban. In April 2025, a cargo ship arrived at Tianjin port carrying 300,000 tons of these Argentine soybeans. The documentation was flawless, and the sacks proudly bore Argentine labels. On the surface, it was a standard trade deal, but Chinese customs officials, trained to spot anomalies, weren't convinced. During routine inspections, they discovered the soybeans had a protein content of 35.1%, higher than the typical 34% for Argentine soybeans, but perfectly aligned with U.S. varieties. Further scrutiny revealed a glaring clue: the sacks were made in the United States. The evidence was irrefutable. These were U.S. soybeans masquerading as Argentine. The entire 300,000-ton shipment was rejected and sent back, sparking global headlines and exposing a bold fraud. This wasn't the first such attempt. In 2024, China intercepted a 200,000-ton shipment of soybeans labeled as Argentine but traced to the U.S. Midwest, unraveling the deception in just 48 hours. China's customs service, equipped with advanced tools like GPS navigation tracking, protein content analysis, and high-precision mass spectrometry, boasts a 98% traceability accuracy rate following a 2024 AI algorithm upgrade. Shanghai Customs alone thwarted multiple origin fraud cases last year, and the Tianjin incident underscored their unrelenting vigilance. China's ability to detect the fraud stems from a sophisticated arsenal of technology. Customs officials use GPS to track freighter routes, ensuring they align with claimed origins. Protein content tests exploit subtle differences in soil and climate. Argentine soybeans typically max out at 34% protein, while U.S. varieties often exceed 35%. High-precision mass spectrometry analyzes 12 indicators to pinpoint a crop's origin with near-perfect accuracy. In 2024, China's customs system underwent a significant overhaul using AI, enabling the rapid detection of discrepancies. For instance, Shanghai Customs intercepted numerous fraud cases last year, leaving counterfeits with nowhere to hide. The April 2025 incident wasn't an isolated case. China has also caught U.S. soybeans disguised as Brazilian. In the fourth quarter of 2024, Shandong port intercepted 3 batches of U.S. soybeans being smuggled as Brazilian, valued at over $20 million. China's blockchain traceability system requires Brazilian soybeans to come with a birth certificate detailing planting plots, harvest times, and transport routes. Any deviation triggers an inspection. A global soybean price database also aids in detecting and monitoring price gaps between Brazil and the U.S. in real time. If Brazilian prices spike unnaturally or the gap with U.S. prices narrows to less than 5%, alarms sound. In February 2025, when Brazilian exporters exaggerated weather-related shortages to inflate prices, China released its reserve soybeans, causing prices to crash and suspending orders. The soybean deception didn't just embarrass the U.S., it infuriated Argentina. In 2024, China imported 4.1 million tons of Argentine soybeans, accounting for over 70% of Argentina's total soybean exports. The fraud tarnished Argentina's reputation, prompting Chinese firms to suspend procurement contracts. Argentina's Ministry of Agriculture filed a WTO complaint, accusing the U.S. of causing $200 million in economic losses. In response, Argentina and China began developing a comprehensive soybean traceability system to ensure that the origin of every batch is verifiable and tamper-proof. The scandal had broader implications. In December 2024, the WTO convened in Geneva, using the incident as an opportunity to push for global origin regulations. The episode also strained U.S.-Brazil relations, as similar attempts to disguise U.S. soybeans as Brazilian were uncovered. After the 2024 Shandong interceptions, China and Brazil's Ministry of Agriculture and Soybean Association agreed to penalize any resale of U.S. soybeans, including export quota cuts and additional tariffs. The soybean saga is a microcosm of the devastating impact of the U.S.-China trade war. Tariffs aim to protect domestic industries, but the fallout hits hardest on the innocent. U.S. farmers face unsold crops, small businesses grapple with rising costs, and consumers worldwide feel the pinch of higher prices. Global supply chains are fraying, and trust in trade is eroding. The deception also harmed Argentine growers, who lost contracts, and Brazilian exporters, who face stricter scrutiny. This incident reveals a stark reality in global trade. Deception is a losing game against advanced technology and international cooperation. As Argentina and Brazil bolster oversight and China's customs sharpen their tools, such schemes are increasingly futile. Yet the trade war rages on, raising a critical question. Will economic rivalry breed more subterfuge, or can nations forge a path to fairer trade? For now, the soybean remains a quiet symbol of a world divided by tariffs and united by the pursuit of truth.